Hello friends, my name is Ihor Havryshchak. This is the YouTube platform of Channel 24. We are live on YouTube, so actively, please put likes, form your questions, we will bring constructive ones out of them in our conversation. Today's guest, I am very welcome and glad to see you. This is Ramiz Yunus, a political scientist from the United States of America and former Chief of Staff of the government of Azerbaijan. Mr. Yunus, hello.
Hello, thank you for the invitation. I am glad to see you in good health. I still greet you from my hometown of Azerbaijan. I greet all our esteemed audience. Glory to Ukraine.
Glory to the heroes. Mr. Yunus, we did not talk to you 2 weeks ago. A lot has passed since then. There is a lot to talk about, of course. This is the exchange of spies and murderers for political prisoners. We will also dwell on this in detail. Also, the elimination of Hamas leader Ismail Haniyeh and the consequences. Shoigu flew there to Tehran to talk. And, of course, this is the United States of America and what is happening there now. Kamala Harris became the official candidate for the presidency of the U.S. Democratic Party. She also introduced a candidate for vice president. This is Tim Walz. They say that he is a great friend of Ukraine. Let's start with the fact that Hamas leader Ismail Haniyeh was eliminated. There is an aggravation in the Middle East. Shoigu urgently flew to Tehran and met with the new president of Iran. What do you think about this? Here is what Reuters reports. Allegedly Putin passed information through Shoigu that Iran should not escalate the situation in the Middle East.
Your voice freezes a little, but I understand roughly what the question is about. That is, the question of the elimination of the Hamas leader in Tehran and the whole background that preceded it, where the roots grow from and what the consequences could be. Did I understand your question correctly? Now let's go in order. And when we analyze these events, as well as everything that will happen today. The Russia-Ukraine war, the Middle East problem and a crisis that could, as many say, lead to a new escalation between Israel and Iran. Consider all this through the prism of the presidential campaign of the United States of America. I don't know how other experts analyze the situation, but as a person living in the United States of America, and given the activity at the American political level, including the last visit of Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and his meetings with officials, as well as with unofficial ones, including the presidential candidate, former President Donald Trump, who is his personal friend and on whom Netanyahu himself has staked, and immediately after that, Ismail Haniyeh is liquidated, and not just anywhere, but directly in a protected area in the center of Tehran. And after the inauguration, he could not be eliminated while he was in Qatar, because there was no permission from the United States of America, and also because it would lead to complications in relations between Qatar and the United States of America. This can be done on the territory of Iran, and by doing this, as you understand, it can put the Biden administration in a very difficult situation. That is, the fact that today it is Netanyahu who adheres to the strategy of maintaining tension in the situation in order to remain in power at least until the end of the year is not only about Israel. The image of the enemy is relevant for all countries, including Iran, Russia and the United States. Any country that can informationally consolidate its nation in the face of an external enemy postpones all its claims to this or that political leader for later. Benjamin Netanyahu has a huge number of questions from Israeli society, including his political opponents. But he, as an experienced politician, plays on it competently. And, as you can see, what happened on October 7 last year? Well, on this basis, despite public opinion polls, everything that preceded October 7, today, you see, he is firmly in his place, and he understands that his problems will begin only after this whole topic stops. And therefore, it is in his interests to keep this topic afloat for as long as possible. Make it relevant. On the other hand, he understands that his opponents are not only Hamas and the Hamas movement, but also all those who I'm on the line. Is the picture frozen?
Everything is fine.
Immediately after the visit, such an event takes place, and we understand that the Joe Biden administration is in a difficult situation, and this is far from accidental. Antony Blinken and all those who do not want an escalation in this situation have begun shuttle diplomacy. Neither Russia, nor Iran, nor half of Israel want this escalation, and the United States of America, including the Joe Biden administration, does not want it either. I think we saw a similar situation in April, when everyone was expecting a big escalation, but then there was a game that turned out to be sewn with white threads, that is, to save Iran's face as well. But first, we need to look at what is happening inside Iran, at the internal political situation. We see that many interesting events have taken place in Iran in recent years, but the starting point can be taken from the moment of the sudden death of former President Ibrahim Raisi, who was distinguished by his radicalism towards Israel and all his neighbors, primarily Azerbaijan. Given that in Iran he was considered one of the real heirs of the leader, a spiritual leader who has long been looking for a successor, there is a struggle for his legacy. He is ill, at an advanced age, and a serious struggle has unfolded over his chair, in which his own son, Mustafa Khamenei, is involved. And in this situation, the former president suddenly dies. Under unclear circumstances, under very incomprehensible circumstances. Therefore, to this day, no one can say for sure what happened there, despite the existing official version of the accident. When such accidents happen, and then we follow the processes, we suddenly see that the candidacy of the current president, Masoud Pezeshkian, who is an ethnic Azerbaijani, appears. He makes statements that have been considered seditious in Iran for 40 years. He publicly declares that he forbids his family to speak Farsi and communicates only in Azerbaijani. He has already said at all rallies that he will defend the ethnic interests of Azerbaijanis, open schools, and so on. That is, everything that used to haunt this group in Iran, as well as other ethnic groups, Baluchis, Kurds, Arabs and others, is now under special attention. Persians, in fact, do not make up the majority of the population. Given such a colorful ethnic composition, the nomination of an ethnic Azerbaijani candidacy can be seen as a way to let off steam and transfer all the negativity that was in Iranian society to this sphere, thereby consolidating the internal situation and stabilizing it. And it seems that the spiritual leader has already resigned himself to the fact that his own son should be put in his place. Because he didn't want to do it, as far as we can tell. Because if he wanted to do it, he would do it in a different way. But the fact that this type of internal political showdown is happening. Iran, like many countries, has many groupings. Power in a country like Iran, with its historical roots and energy capabilities, always creates complex internal dynamics. Naturally, groups are formed there, and each of them seeks to promote its candidate to promising positions around the spiritual leader. It is not only the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, which can be considered a state within a state with its own capabilities and military structures. And now, it seems, as if they also bet on him. Well, anyway, he has a fairly strong position in the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps. I mean Ali Khamenei's son. And that's why the arrows have been reversed today in the social issue. And what is most interesting, just the other day the spiritual leader gave a decree on the transfer of some of his military powers to the newly elected president. This only makes it extreme in case of a sudden escalation. That is, first you give him permission and bring him forward, because without the permission of the spiritual leader, everyone understands that the current president would not be even close to this presidential campaign. This means that this happened within the framework of some kind of multi-move that he is playing, because the current president of Iran, due to the lack of spiritual rank, is not quoted for the role of spiritual leader. That is, he is not a competitor of Ali Khamenei's son, as former President Ibrahim Raisi was. And therefore, as I understand it, he needs stability within Iran. And since it needs stability inside Iran, it does not need any escalation, including external escalation, especially in relations with Israel. And therefore, in words, as they say, there will be a lot of things. But in reality, I think this will be repeated with the situation in April. Moreover, look at what an armada twice as large from the United States also came there. Because, as you understand, this combination that Benjamin Netanyahu played with the elimination of Ismail Haniyeh forces Biden to play by his rules. Because Biden does not like Netanyahu. But for all this, the United States and Israel are strategic allies outside NATO. And therefore, whether Biden likes Netanyahu or not, he will be forced to defend Israel in this situation. And so the destroyers and everything else got there. Another thing here is how he will defend. Biden will defend well. This can be used within the political kitchen. As you see, I defend Israel. On the other hand, he will defend poorly. Donald Trump and his team will use this as an argument to show how Biden protects our ally. Therefore, what is happening in the Middle East and in the relations between Israel and Iran should be viewed exclusively through the prism of the election campaign in the United States of America. Here, the parties have different stakes. For Benjamin Netanyahu, the stake is Donald Trump, and for the team of Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, the stake is a continuation of the current policy. That is, support for Israel, but not in the same way as under Donald Trump, and at the same time an attempt to enlist the support of the Palestinian community in the United States, which is quite active. Recent rallies in the United States and what happened from west to east on college campuses clearly confirm this. Therefore, I will summarize, so that you understand, everything that is happening there is directly related to the elections in the United States. Therefore, the current administration does not want an escalation. And I think that's why all these voyages take place, and sometimes the special services and intelligence work. And in this regard, it is interesting to consider the visit of the Secretary of the Security Council, Sergei Shoigu, the former Minister of Defense, who seemed to have left the team. No, he stayed in the team. This is the tactic of the current government in Russia. They all shuffle the cards, but he doesn't deal them. As you understand, this must be given credit to the President of Russia. He consistently works with the same team. And this is also an element of cementing everyone around the leader. And as you can see, it works. And despite the fact that all of Sergei Shoigu's deputies are now in prison, he, so to speak, was taken out of this territory, and today he can safely fly to create a PR campaign. Perceive Sergei Shoigu's visit as a PR campaign for Russia, both for the domestic audience and for the West. Because, look, this is happening in parallel with the exchange of these prisoners. I think we will also talk about this topic. That is, the topic of Russia, because the exchange of prisoners took place with Russia. Sergei Shoigu represents Russia's Middle East conflict. He seems to be nearby. Russia is an active player in the Middle East, including not only the Arab conflict, but also the events around Syria. Russia is a certain partner of Iran, although I would not say an ally, but still a partner for a certain time. They are historically connected, and what is happening today, their confrontation with the West, unites them. But each of them is ready to make a deal with the West, you can see it. And Russia does this regularly. And this exchange of prisoners is one of the cogs in this topic. And Shoigu's visit once again confirms that we are also active and can influence Iran. Well, on the one hand, they, of course, supply air defense there, but, on the other hand, this is a curtsy to the West. We are also in favor of not escalating. Because, as I understand it, the euphoria in the Kremlin subsided a little after the failed assassination attempt on Trump, when they thought that Trump would already easily win the election. Today, when the Democrats managed to overcome the split and nominated Kamala Harris as vice president, and Biden became a presidential candidate, the Kremlin is beginning to understand that Trump may not become president. Therefore, it is necessary to look for common ground with the White House, and not to go for confrontation. In this context, we can consider the PR campaign associated with Sergei Shoigu's visit, first to Tehran, and then to Azerbaijan, where he met with the president and the country's leadership. Because, as you understand, Azerbaijan directly borders Iran. Half of Iran's population are ethnic Azerbaijanis, and therefore Azerbaijan is far from indifferent. Everything that is happening on the borders between Azerbaijan and Iran is in the vicinity. Therefore, naturally, Shoigu, as is customary in big politics, flew to Azerbaijan to inform the country's leadership about the contacts that took place. Because Azerbaijan and Russia are in quite good pragmatic relations today. Unlike 30 years ago, Azerbaijan has managed to build an effective multi-vector policy with all its neighbors. Both with the northern neighbor and with the southern neighbor. And, in principle, with Europe, the United States of America and China. Despite the differences between these countries and the different perceptions of Azerbaijan, as well as all the problems related to its independence, including the main problem, the Karabakh conflict. But, despite this, Azerbaijan managed to successfully maneuver and achieve good results, liberated Karabakh, restored its sovereignty and territorial integrity. Today, Azerbaijan is respected both in Tehran and in Moscow. Therefore, Sergei Shoigu's visit to Tehran, and then to Baku, is quite logical and understandable. Another thing, take it as a PR campaign. Summing up, I can say that I do not foresee any escalation in this situation, since neither Russia, nor Iran, nor Israel, nor the Biden administration needs it. So I think they will find a Solomonic solution, but the game and the tension will continue until the end of this year.
You mentioned Trump's and Biden, the United States. Kamala Harris has officially become a contender for the presidency of the United States from the Democrats. And Tim Walz from Minnesota. Many say that this candidacy unexpectedly became the post of vice president. How cunning do you think this is from the Democrats? How much? How much are they winning now, outplaying the Republicans? And this is the global question, Mr. Yunus. In the context of cooperation between Ukraine and the United States of America, what is better for the Democrats in the White House or Republicans to continue? What do you think?
You know, I don't like to engage in propaganda and sometimes say things that Ukrainians may not like, but an expert should not be biased. And therefore, when some politician in the United States says good words that are liked there in Kyiv, this does not mean that he is a friend of Ukraine. Remember Lindsey Graham, who came to Kyiv and said a lot of things, and look at what songs he sings today. So take everything Kamala Harris and her vice presidential candidate, Tim Walz, say through the prism of the party's overall policy and approach to Ukraine. That is, what goals and objectives it pursues. And then we will see that the tandem of Kamala Harris and Tim Walz is no different from the Biden-Kamala Harris tandem. That is, the policy pursued by the current administration will continue. Another question is how much you like or dislike this policy. But you have seen it for the last 2.5 years, that is, after the start of Russia's full-scale aggression against Ukraine. This policy will continue both until the end of the year and after the change of administration. Another thing is that during these 6 months, while the presidential campaign is going on, they will react more actively. This will manifest itself not only in words, but also in concrete actions, such as financial injections and supplies. But I do not think that this will be very different from the policy that they pursued earlier. From the point of view of the domestic political situation in the United States, how this may affect the shares and capabilities of this or that party, I can say that, as I have always mentioned on the air of your channel, dear Ihor, and on other platforms, I believe that in the end Biden and Trump will not be on the list. One of them will have to get off. There will be other names. It may well be that even these two names cannot be there. But, as you can see, Biden has already left, and now we are seeing other names from the Democratic Party. Oh. Here it is worth remembering the mistake that Donald Trump made by appointing J.D. Vance as vice president. Why is this a mistake, from my point of view? Because if he had chosen Nikki Haley, Trump would have definitely won this presidential campaign, even if Biden had withdrawn his candidacy. Because the results of the U.S. elections will be determined by several key states, where Nikki Haley enjoys significant authority. They even support her more than Trump himself and Biden himself, including Kamala Harris herself. But after that unsuccessful, thank God, attempt on Donald Trump, he, as I understand, began to have euphoria and, possibly, problems with the perception of reality. He already considers himself the father of the nation, and many people have gathered around him who support this idea. And on this basis, he chose his young clone, who repeats all the same ideas as himself. And the vice president who is paired with you needs to be a little different from you in order to balance the whole range of interests across America, as, for example, Kamala Harris did with her choice, given the opportunities that the Democrats had. And this mistake, as I understand it, the Democrats will play on today, because J.D. Vance is not a person at the federal level. A young guy. He is not even 40 years old, he does not have a significant political background, and almost no one in America knows him. 2 years ago, Donald Trump made him a senator. This is a friend of his son. The son brought him to him. He apologized to him, and he made a senator out of him. He can make a senator out of him, but it takes time to make him a politician at the federal level. It takes at least 10 years to do this. He should work in the Senate, in Congress, do some government work at the federal level or at least at the state level. He was a governor, a fairly successful governor. Then she was the U.S. ambassador to the UN. This is already at the federal level. This is already an international level. And, of course, the same Tim Walz worked for many years, 12 years in Congress. And after that, he has been a successful governor for 2 terms. This is usually the standard path that most presidential and vice presidential candidates of the United States of America take. Look at everyone, including Kamala Harris, who served as a long-time senator and prosecutor. And what was J.D. Vance's job? He has no political background, and this is a weak point. Trump proceeded from the fact that he did not need a vice president, he just needed a person who would stand next to him and look into his mouth, that is, in fact, he would not do anything. Why then choose a vice president, if only to avoid Mike Pence's mistakes, in your opinion? That is, he did not need a second Mike Pence. And that's why Nikki Haley is not Mike Pence or J.D. Vance. She is an independent politician with a fairly significant authority. The mistake that Donald Trump made could cost him dearly. And sir, when Kamala Harris was choosing between Fisher and Walz, she chose him, even though she could have chosen the governor of Pennsylvania. They're equal in weight in politics. But as I understand it, he was elected precisely to be successful in these undecided states, because these states are where J.D. Vance and Tim Walz himself will work. Judging by the track record, the biography of the current candidate, Tim Walz, is certainly preferable. But here is another very important point. You saw that this affected the fate of Joe Biden. I am referring to the debates that are scheduled in just a month. And one debate should be between Kamala Harris and Donald Trump. Now they are discussing where and when it will take place, but I think that the debate must take place, otherwise it will be perceived as an insult to the Americans and each of them. If one of them refuses, the other will be able to competently use this situation. So I think the debate should take place, and it will be very interesting to see how Trump behaves in this situation. After all, the entire election campaign of Trump and his team was built on the fact that it was Biden who would participate against him. And that's the fact that Biden got off, they'll be sure that he won't get off. Understand? And so they will probably have to change all tactics, including the tactics of conducting debates for both Trump himself and his partner J.D. Vance. Time is very short, but it is important to consider that each side must have its own strategy. If Trump behaves the same way as he did with Joe Biden, and there is a prosecutor sitting across from him who talks to him like a criminal, this could affect the outcome. Therefore, each side must develop its own special tactics. This is a show, and it will be received especially closely in the undecided states. I'm not talking about those who have already made up their minds. Democrats and Republicans, they make up 30% each. Opinion polls show that both sides are skewing the results. Pro-Republican polls give Trump a 2 to 3% advantage, and this must be taken into account. Pro-democracy give 2 to 3% to Kamala Harris. This is not true, neither here nor there. They are neck and neck, and what is happening in these undecided states can be said for sure after these debates. Because, as you have seen, the reaction of the American public to Joe Biden's unfortunate debate has been significant. Despite his 50 years of experience in the U.S., in Congress, as vice president and president, even against this backdrop, the country's economic situation remains in question. All this was forgotten for him, and he had to withdraw his candidacy. That is, important debates are very important. It is very relevant, both the debate between Kamala Harris and Donald Trump, and the debate between two potential vice presidential candidates. And after that, it will be possible to clearly say who will win these elections. Democrats have more money. Money plays, of course, a big role. The show that the Democrats will hold on August 19 will be no less bright and pompous than the one staged by the Republican. But this does not mean that the one who spent more money and put on a brighter show will necessarily have a victory. It is very important to have a successful debate and understand how it will affect the situation in these states. However, I think the Republicans made a small mistake in their campaign with the vice presidential nominee. If the Democrats can take advantage of this mistake, the Republicans could be in big trouble, and even Netanyahu's problems in the Middle East will not be able to cover them up.
Thank you very much for your detailed and expert explanation of the processes in the United States of America. I would also like to ask, are there now hostilities in the Russian Federation, the Kursk region? Well, of course, you are not a military expert, but I would like to ask about the reaction of the United States of America. State Department spokesman Matthew Miller said that Ukraine did not warn about the actions in Kursk and this does not violate U.S. policy. At the same time, White House spokesman John Kirby confirmed that Kiev did not provide warnings, but promised to provide some data. And now I remember our previous conversations. You have mentioned more than once that I did not quite believe in the lack of coordination, and you said that the armed forces of Ukraine act and make decisions independently, but coordination is still present. I thought that the United States of America was more specifically and in detail aware of the processes in the armed forces of Ukraine. But now we see what you said. It was a surprise for the United States of America, but they say that the armed forces of Ukraine decide for themselves what to do. To what extent do you think the United States of America can disapprove or approve of such movements?
I think that in the current situation in the United States of America, bearing in mind the election campaigns, the Ukrainian military political leadership also takes into account everything that is happening. And what is happening today in the border zone should also be considered from this point of view. And I do not think that the United States of America and the current administration will exert any definite pressure on official Kyiv.
Mr. Yunus, I would also like to ask you, we have not seen each other for 2 weeks, as I mentioned at the beginning of the broadcast. The exchange that took place is the most significant since World War II and the Cold War. Western countries, including Germany, North America, Poland and others, have returned political prisoners, while Russia has brought back spies and, of course, Krasakov's killer. Why did this happen now? Why did this exchange take place, and can it be linked to the elections in the United States of America?
Again, your voice was a little subtle, but I basically understood. You asked what this exchange meant, why it happened now, and where it came from, to summarize your question. As I said at the beginning of our conversation, this should be viewed exclusively through the prism of the presidential campaign in the United States. Such events occur regularly in America, and every president has tried to use them as part of his PR campaign. This has always happened either when the president was just taking office or during certain elections. And given that the United States of America holds congressional elections every 2 years and elects a president every 4 years, before one campaign is over, another begins. Therefore, the elimination of some terrorist abroad, who is an enemy of the United States, is often used as a PR stunt. Remember the elimination of bin Laden, al-Baghdadi and other terrorist leaders whom Americans consider enemies of the United States. This was done by different administrations, different presidents. And it was always shown as a big, so to speak, PR campaign. Just like the release of US citizens who were held hostage in other countries. But given that lately it has been, well, it was the same back in the days of the Soviet Union, the times of the Cold War between the United States and the Soviet Union. And given that today between Russia and the United States, as well as the collective West as a whole, the same, if not more Cold War is taking place. The West is involved on a much larger scale than it was in the days of the USSR and the United States. After all, there is already an institution called the European Union. And therefore we see this confrontation in the informational, ideological, economic and military technical planes, as well as in issues of this kind. In addition to spy scandals, we see that ordinary random people who just happen to be on the territory of Russia are used as a bargaining chip. And it is no coincidence that the U.S. State Department and other official structures warn U.S. citizens and holders of American passports to avoid traveling to certain countries. There is a certain list of countries that have it. That is, any American should be interested in this information before traveling to another country. Yes, of course, the United States of America says that it will fight for every American, but why once again subject itself and its fate to the test? Judging by the composition of people who ended up in Russian prisons, it is clear that these are really random people who have nothing to do with government work, spy scandals and similar issues. Unlike who the Russian side gets. Here is an important point, which perhaps not everyone noticed. German Chancellor Olaf Scholz played an active role. To resolve the issue with Krasikov, his consent was required. And Olaf Scholz had to sell it, somehow present it to German society. It was for this reason that Russia urgently found 5 Germans on its territory, arrested them, and they became a bargaining chip. Many do not even know their surnames. Ask you now, dear Igor, as well as all the others. No one knows about this, because other names are heard. And it was these names that became the argument on the basis of which Russia and the Americans, perhaps, even tacitly agreed. Because everything that happened in this exchange has nothing to do with the Russian-Ukrainian war, the Middle East conflict, or other problems that exist in the world. This is solely the result of the fact that each of the countries involved in the first place, Russia and the United States of America, played its game, agreeing behind the scenes. I explained the interests of each of the parties. First of all, let's start with the United States of America. The presidential campaign is a huge success for the current administration, personally for the Biden and Harris administrations. For example, Harris was also at the airport meeting, which emphasizes the continuity from Biden. It has been actively involved in this process. Look at how this irritates Donald Trump, because, on the one hand, he should be happy about the release of American citizens who are not really spies, but on the other hand, it makes him uncomfortable. If they were spies, the situation would be different. The exchange would have been presented differently, as it was, for example, in the exchange on the bridge, which even served as the basis for the film. When spies are exchanged, it is not done so publicly. And now, you see, this is a PR campaign, which means that someone needs it. And who needs it? First of all, it means that Biden and Harris need it, and they competently sorted it out. Why did Russia do this? I think the Kremlin's euphoria over the fact that Trump is 100% winning, it seems that they have subsided a little. And therefore they understand, and he may not win. No one can say for sure today. Therefore, it is necessary to consider option B. And option B means that we will have to continue to work with this administration, including Kamala Harris. Because all the major players are basically in the Kamala Harris administration, they will stay and continue that policy. And based on this, it means that we need to play along with them in this situation. And in order to play along with them in this situation, it means that we need to make this exchange quite real. And so they decided so that the Russian side would also be satisfied. That is, what did Russia get? It received a continuation of this slogan, "We do not give up our own." This once again emphasizes that tomorrow the same Krasikovs may appear in other cities and carry out the tasks of the Russian special services, depending on the tasks assigned to them. And they will be sure that the Russian state will stand behind them to the end and will do everything possible to get them out of this situation. This is also a plus for the President of Russia personally and also for his entire team. This is also part of a PR campaign and should be viewed through this prism. Do not forget that in Russia, the special services have been in power for 25 years, and they know not only how to take power, but also how to keep it. Therefore, in this situation, this is a curtsy to the Biden administration, and a plus for Russia itself and the current government in the Kremlin. And as a continuation, Shoigu's visit to Iran can also be seen as a curtsy to the Biden administration. This demonstrates that Russia is also not interested in escalation, and hopes that this will be assessed so as not to create additional problems in the Russian-Ukrainian direction. But there is one more human moment that is very important to note. For me, this is of great importance, and I understand that dear Ihor and the Ukrainian audience are primarily interested in this. And how does this relate to Ukraine? What does this have to do with Ukraine? It has nothing to do with Ukraine. Moreover, first of all, those people who are in one way or another responsible for what is happening today on the part of Russia in relation to Ukraine have been released. Because all representatives of the Russian liberal opposition, regardless of their last name, whether it is the late Alexei Navalny or those who are now on everyone's lips, including those who have been released and those who may still be in Russia or abroad, they are all enemies of Ukraine. All of them opposed the territorial integrity of Ukraine, especially in 2014. From 2014 to the present day, let them bring someone who would come out in such a way, and frankly, I mean the leaders of the Russian opposition. Speaking out against war is one thing. Look at the statements made by Ilya Yashin and other representatives of the opposition who have been released. Ukraine is not present there at all. The war must be stopped urgently and everything so that people do not die and so on. Our guys are dying, the third, the fourth, ordinary Russians. Nothing should be done against ordinary Russians. And these ordinary Russians are killing ordinary Ukrainians there today. This is not only done by the authorities. The authorities guide this process. And ordinary Russians go there and do it for money. What interests do they protect there? Russia's interests. Yes, if they defend the Kursk region now, this can be understood. This is actually an internationally recognized territory of Russia. They can say that they are defending the Kursk region or the Rostov region, but when this happens on the territory of Ukraine, what is it called? And what are you calling for? Therefore, this whole Russian liberal position, they are imperialists, they are both enemies of Ukraine, they are enemies of Georgia, regarding Abkhazia, the Skamvali region, they are enemies of my native Azerbaijan. Because we all know how they behaved during Karabakh. And all these representatives of the Russian liberal crowd, whether in the media, such as Echo Moskvy, the same Benedict, here he is sitting in Moscow, and no one touches him. He walks, receives instructions on the old square, and presents them as the Russian liberal opposition, comes to their studio. And this is all allowed. And they have been operating in this paradigm for 20 years, allowed by the Russian authorities. And when did they work? And the dozed TV company, all this Latinina, all this information garbage that they hammered into the heads of their Russians, they worked out this role, they had a specific role. It's just that the rules have changed a little, and now, while they were working out this role, democracy in the face of the West with autocracy in the face of Russia was earning trillions. And now they have quarreled, and the Kremlin, according to the concepts of the West, violated these rules on February 24, 2022, and this war began. And as a result, they did not orient themselves in these rules. And many of them have begun to leave this country right now. And why hasn't there been anything like this against you since 2014? Why didn't you raise your voice in the right way then? And they know very well how you raised it, both in Azerbaijan, and in Georgia, and in Ukraine as well. Therefore, when we understand this and wonder, who did it? This is what the West did. Now look, today, here I am now, do we have a live broadcast? Dear Igor, as I understand it, literally before the broadcast, I watched The Voice of America. For those who are interested, take a look. Here is the latest issue currently on The Voice of America. When I say on your channels all the time that these channels promote Russian narratives, yes, and that, despite the fact that they say a lot of things, sometimes beautiful words, they have concretely, moreover, this is the mouthpiece of the Democratic Party. The transmission begins. Evening news, top news in prime time. The first 15 minutes show Yashin's speech live. People have gathered, about 30 to 40 people, and this is presented as the main international news. Why do this? Why promote all this? They are also promoting this cook Tikhanovskaya, whom no one in Belarus even perceives at all, if you take it this way. Because she said so many stupid things, it would be better to keep silent. You see, when a person who is far from politics is made into a soap bubble, in the end, who needs it? Because a lot of money is written off for this, large grants are circulating there, but this has no practical significance and will not have any practical significance either on the territory of Belarus or on the territory of Russia. These Russian liberal oppositionists, including Yulia Navalnaya, are also being made into a soap bubble today. And how will this soap bubble be used on the territory of Russia? Yes, it will not be applicable there in any way. This is the same as it was with Soviet dissidents during the confrontation between the Soviet Union and the United States of America. Did any of them come to power later? Who came to power? Gorbachev came during Perestroika, then a representative of the same party nomenclatura, Boris Yeltsin, came. And Boris Yeltsin surrendered all this power to representatives of the special services. And where were all these dissidents? They were nowhere to be found. Therefore, what are they used for? This is exactly what I am leading to, so as not to build illusions and understand that the West has other interests and goals in these conflicts. They need good management and conflicts in order to influence a particular situation through the management of these conflicts. I have been in big politics for many years. Yes, I have seen both the First Karabakh War and the Second Karabakh War. I live in the West and I know the situation quite well from the inside. And I remember 2008, by the way, today 808.08 is just another anniversary of Russia's August aggression against Georgia. And remember how the West behaved in that situation then. And they were already 30 kilometers from Tbilisi, and what did they do? Did they punish Russia for this in any way? No, they, Barack Obama and Joe Biden, announced a reset in 2009, signed a contract for Nord Stream 1 and so on. And then there was the annexation of Crimea in 2014, again under Obama and Biden. That is, these double and triple standards, my native Azerbaijan, Georgia led by Saakashvili, who has done so much for European integration and NATO, fall under the distribution. And what did he get for it? He got the fact that he is sitting in a prison cell today, and no one cares about his fate. And what did you get? You got what you were left with, such a colossus in front of you today, and one step forward to the West, two steps back. Now he says, shoot, then, I allow, then, I don't allow, and all this talk. And when you turn on the news, and suddenly, for 15 minutes, the Voice of America in Russian rants about some press conference by Ilya Yashin, which is of no interest to anyone and has no meaning for geopolitics and international politics. I can understand when the day of the exchange is really news, and here is the background of this news, which I deciphered directly: PR in the United States, PR in Moscow and PR in Germany for Olaf Scholz. That is, it was just such a prank, these people were used for this. The topic should be closed. Nobody is interested in it. For 15 minutes, the key channel pushes this news. And all the news remained. The Middle East topic was left aside. The Russian-Ukrainian topic remains. Then, yes, they start it later. Usually, when central news broadcasts start, they start with break news. This should be said about the key ones. About what comes first, comes second. And they, look what they are talking about. This means that if the stars light up, it means that someone needs it. Does Ukraine need this? I don't think Ukraine needs it. Therefore, Do not look for justice here, because there is no justice in big politics. From the point of view of morality, this is, of course, an immoral exchange, because peaceful people are exchanged for a murderer. Did anyone ask the family of a murdered Chechen in Germany? They didn't even know about it. And where is justice? Therefore, there is no justice in big politics, unfortunately. Just keep this in mind, draw conclusions, and remember that the rescue of the drowning is the work of the drowning themselves. Become stronger and do not always rely on donors, because at the right moment you can find yourself under the distribution. Therefore, it is better to know this, understand and gain strength, muscles, as well as set the agenda yourself, the one that you can. Yes, when you understand that, then you can take whatever you need from them, whether it's athletes, wool sheep, or a club. But it's better to play your own game, play according to your agenda, and where they coincide, fine, and where they don't coincide, disagree and do whatever you have to do. I will tell you honestly, I am very glad that my native Azerbaijan has been doing just that in recent years. And such a policy, equal distance from everyone, from the northern neighbor, from the southern, from China, from Europe, from everyone, led to the fact that we have achieved our goals, and today everyone wants to have good, loyal, pragmatic and normal relations with Azerbaijan. And what they think about us in their hearts and how they feel about our victory, we personally do not care. We took what was ours, we will not give it to anyone else.
Mr. Yunus, thank you very much for this conversation. Thank you for taking the time to discuss important processes and explain what is happening in the United States of America. Once again, I welcome you to my native Azerbaijan. I am very glad that you had the opportunity to visit it again. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Goodbye. Glory to Ukraine.